accompanied by Mr. Prabhakara Nair, founder, president of the Malaysia-India Heritage Society, and Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bawood, Dean of the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC IIUM. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the national anthem. Thank you. Please be seated. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bawood, Dean International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC IIUM, yang berusaha Mr. Prabhakara Nair, Founder President Malaysia-India Heritage Society, His Excellency S.A.M. Abdullahi Barrow, Ambassador of Senegal to Malaysia, His Excellency B.N. Reddy, High Commissioner of India to Malaysia, Your Excellency represent honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, participants of the Forum on Ahmadou Bamba, Mahatma Gandhi, the Future of Peace and Non-Violent Struggles. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, salam sejahtera and a very good morning. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome all of you to the Forum on Ahmadou Bamba, Mahatma Gandhi, the Future of Peace and Non-Violent Struggles at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, a collaboration between ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, the forum is aimed at improving the public understanding of issues of peace and violence, which are now at the heart of global concern. In particular, the forum seeks to inform the public about the life and thought of two great advocates of peace through non-violent means in the past, from whom we may learn useful lessons about their struggle. The two figures are Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba of Senegal and Mahatma Gandhi of India. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, before proceeding with the welcoming speech, I would like to invite Ustaz Osman Nordin, Religious Officer of ISTAC IIUM, to lead the recitation of dua. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi and very good morning. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka fawatihal khair wa khawatimahu wa jawami'ahu وأوله وظاهره وباطنه والدرجات العلى من الجنة آمين. Oh Allah, We ask you to make our supplication the best they can be. Grant us success in our efforts, rightness in our action, and the best of rewards. O Allah, we seek you to make our scales heavy with rewards. Grant us patience in our actions, patience in our work, dedication in our duties. Merciful Allah, who have planned our death with many actions to benefit Islam and the Ummah, please accept from us. Grant us blessing and mercy and guide all of us. At this moment, we beg you to keep showing us the path to fruitful actions and discussion and guide us in removing our shortcomings. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل اللهم فينا ولا معنا ولا من يتبعنا شقيا ولا مطرودا ولا محروما ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Amin Ya Rabbal Alameen. Thank you, Ustad Osman. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite the Dean of the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC IIUM, Professor Dato Dr. Abdul Aziz Barud, to deliver his welcoming speech. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Young Bar-Usha, Mr. Parab Harkan Nair, founder, president, Malaysia-India Heritage Society, co-organizer for this event. His Excellency B.N. Reddy, High Commissioner of India to Malaysia, His Excellency S.E.M. Abdullahi Baru, Ambassador of Senegal to Malaysia, Professor Dato Dr. Osman Bakar, Chair Al-Ghazali, holder of Al-Ghazali Chair, ISTAC IIUM, Your Excellencies, representative from Diplomatic Corps, honorable panelists, speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, participants of the Forum on Ahmadou Bamba, Mahatma Gandhi, the future of peace and non-violent struggles. Assalamu alaikum and good morning once again. First of all, let me welcome all our participants, scholars, Your Excellencies, to ISTAC IIUM, the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. It's a great honor to have you here talking about one of the most important topics to deal with in our critical time, especially not only at the local, regional, and international level, but it becomes a global situation in which peace, non-violence must become the order of the day if we wanted to save the world, brothers and sisters, Your Excellencies. So it is a great honor to see Al-Ghazali Chair, Professor Osman Bakar, and the President of the Malaysian Heritage Society collaborating on this very important topic. The aim of this forum, number one, is to celebrate and revisit the great ideas of great people, Mahatma Gandhi and Ahmadou Bamba, these two great figures who made history and have written in the history of humanity that non-violence and peace can create a balanced civilization, brothers and sisters. Number two, we gathered here to share ideas and views and to learn these lessons. And number three, we gathered here to tell our audience and participant that we are all caring for this philosophy, this practice of non-violence and peace for the benefit of the whole world. Brothers and sisters, it's a great honor to have two ambassadors here. The High Commissioner of India and the Ambassador of Senegal, it's really something great, showing the support to what we do here in academia. And here in academia, we show our support in what's happening in the community and in the society. So brothers and sisters, I hope with the presence of these great speakers and scholars and experts, we can share great ideas and we take it from there. I hope that this forum will not be the first, but the starting of discussions, activities, and actions that we can all take to promote the idea of peace. I don't want to talk about the great achievements and works of Ahmadou Bamba and the great achievements and struggles of Mahatma Gandhi. I think the speakers, that's what they will do. But for me, as the dean of this institute, I tell you that we are today the most or the happiest people to have you all here speaking about these two great people. With this, I thank you. May God bless you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bawood, for the insightful welcoming speech. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I respectfully invite Mr. Prabhakara Nair, Founder, President of Malaysia India Heritage Society, to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergul, Dean, International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, His Excellency SEM Abdoulaye Barrow, Ambassador of Senegal to Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. B.N. Reddy, High Commissioner of India to Malaysia, Your Excellencies, representatives from diplomatic corps, honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, participants of the forum on Ahmadou Bamba, Mahatma Gandhi, the future of peace and non-violent struggles. Salam Sejahtera and a very good morning. As President of the Malaysia-India Heritage Society, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to ISTAC for co-organizing this remarkable confluence of ideas, bridging two profound spiritual traditions represented by Ahmadou Bamba of Senegal and Mahatma Gandhi of India. Thanks to distinguished Professor Emeritus, Dr. Osman Bakar, for bringing us together. Ahmadou Bamba's universalism transcends the boundaries of Senegal and also of the Muslim Ummah and resonates deeply with people of all religious backgrounds in Malaysia. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi has been a beacon of peace and non-violence in public imagination of Malaya for well over a century. The Mahatma's message continues to inspire diverse groups across the country, regardless of religious or ethnic affiliation. By connecting Ahmadou Bamba with Mahatma Gandhi, we weave together the spiritual fabric of two traditions in celebration of a shared heritage that holds significance not just for Malaysia, but for the entire world. Both Bamba and Gandhi offer a universal appeal to Malaysians from all walks of life. Their messages, though delivered through different idioms and approaches, converge on the principles of peace, non-violence, unity, and mutual respect. These values are essential for the harmony of Malaysia's multi-ethnic society, Senegal's multicultural mosaic, India's diverse communities, as well as the global family. Bamba's religious idiom complements Gandhi's cosmopolitan approach, creating a synergistic message of peace and coexistence. Their teachings are invaluable for fostering harmony and ensuring our collective survival in these troubled times. Friends, the occasion today allows the Malaysia-India Heritage Society to reflect on our own ideals of peace, diplomacy, and non-violence, involving not just the people of two great nations and cultures, Malaysia and India, but also the peoples and nations of the world, in line with the concept of Vasudeva Kudumbakam, referring to the world as one big family of God. The Malaysia-India Heritage Society, established in 2017, aims to foster understanding across political, religious, linguistic, and ideological divides. We believe the best diplomacy speaks the language of the heart, unimpeded by race, religion, or politics. Cultural diplomacy and reconciliation have become increasingly important as a means of avoiding wars and resolving conflicts in a world that is teetering on the brink of nuclear holocaust. And I'm happy to say that our society was formed as a step towards establishing global understanding through cultural diplomacy. Although our main focus is on creating a rich corpus of knowledge about the shared cultural, historical, and spiritual heritage linking Malaysia and India, the nature of heritage, culture, and spirituality is such that it necessitates finding common ground with the rest of humanity, enriching our understanding, and giving greater depth to our heritage. In this attempt, we are happy to be given the opportunity to enrich our understanding of Senegalese history and spiritual heritage. Thank you, ISTAC, for opening your doors to the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Let us continue our cooperation in pursuance of a better future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prabhakaran Nair. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now, may I respectfully invite His Excellency Abdoulaye Barrow, the Ambassador of Senegal to Malaysia, to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Dr. Abdulaziz Berkut, Dean of International Institute of Islamic Truth and Civilization, yang bersuha Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, Founder President Malaysia India Heritage Society, Your Excellency, dear friend BN Reddy, High Commission of India to Malaysia, Excellencies, representative from diplomatic corps, honorable panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen, participants of the Forum on Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi, the future of peace and non-violent struggles. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Salam si jatra and very good morning to all of you. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor Emeritus Dr. Datuk Usman Bakar, ISTAC, IIUM, and the Heritage Society of India in Malaysia for inviting me to this forum as a guest of honor. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this forum, the future of peace and non-violent struggle, is more than topical. It takes place in a context where the world is particularly shaken by multiple conflicts, be they economic, religious, civil, or military, thus increasing the ecological and or directly human damage. In this world in crisis, the culture of peace and nonviolence must be developed everywhere and by everyone. Thus, the theme of the forum is in perfect harmony with the dynamic and focuses of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi, two great international figures who stood out in their times during the colonization period through acts of courage as an alternative solution in the prevailing social norm, redressing injustice and restoring freedom and equality. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, while we wait for the panelists to tell us more about these two protagonists of nonviolence, I would like to focus briefly on the nonviolence advocated by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Mbake. It is worth remembering that the French colonial system had two main objectives: to plunder the economic resources available on African soil in order to exploit them in France, and to impose Western culture and civilization on the colonized countries and territories. In the face of this imperialism, Africans organized impressive anti-colonialist resistance movement in the 19th century. These movements were embodied by leaders of exceptional status, such as Almami Samori Touré, Sheikh Omar Tal of Senegal, Almami Samori Touré is from Guinea, Bihanzen from Ghana, Ladjor from Senegal, among others. However, the resistance movement soon realized that they were ineffective in the face of the technical superiority of the European invaders. Following the defeat of most of these armed resistance fighters, another form of struggle was born in the face of the colonial oppression. With the advent of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, who chose to fight the battle on the cultural and ideological terrain. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, or Khadim Rasul, the servant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Serigne Touba, the religious guide of the city of Touba in Senegal, was born by 1853 in Senegal. In 1888, he founded the village of Touba. Today is the second largest town in Senegal in terms of population, the seat of his Quranic teachings, assimilated into a tariqa, way in Arabic, or brotherhood, if you talk English. In the Muridia or Muridism, etymologically, Murid comes from al-Murid, which means aspirant or postulant. Mouridism belongs to Sunni and Sufi branches. After studying and giving careful thought to the methods used by armed resistance, whether for political or jihadist ends, the Sheikh came to realize the ineffectiveness of the means of struggle employed by armed resistance fighters. So he used his jihad around the concept of nonviolence to lead the fight against colonial domination. Ladies and gentlemen, wrongly accused by the colonial powers of harboring armed jihad intentions, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba reaffirmed his commitment to serving the cause of Islam and raising its banner based on science and piety, and not on conventional weapons, known for that purpose. He explained the nature of the jihad he is waging and which he intends to remain and the weapon at his disposal to make his enemies capitulate. Addressing his oppressors, he said, I quote, "My jihad is waged through science and piety, in my capacity as a slave of God and servant of his prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who governs all things, is my witness. My weapons are the Quran and the hadith of the prophet, peace upon him." Faced with the acculturation project of French colonization on the population of West Africa, the Sheikh chose to lead his resistance on the cultural and ideological terrain through his pen. In his book, Ilham Salam, he wrote, I quote again, "I know that these Westerners have been led astray by Satan, who had led them towards divine disobedience, audacity, and perdition." End of quote. He lured them with his stratagem to the point where they arrogantly began to roam the entire world and oppress people. So, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba set up Quranic schools or madrasa where zikr, naming Allah, was practiced, and his writings, known as qasaid, were chanted. For his many disciples, the mission of the guide of Mouridism appeared to be expression of a spiritual awakening in observance of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In addition, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba transcended the notion of jihad to recall its mystical aspect, those of working on oneself and patience in the face of the trials of the world. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba devoted his life to prayer, meditation, and contemplation. He systematically refused to place his skills at the service of the French colonial authorities, showing himself to be hostile to colonial domination and tenaciously defending the traditional values of his country, creating a tariqa, Mouridism, and inculcating his teachings, discipline, tolerance, obedience to the Sheikh, and the cult of work, all of which were deeply rooted in the societies of northern Senegambia. Because of the massive adherence of disciples, the Sheikh caused the French colonial administration through he was preparing a rebellion against it. Wrongly. On 5th September 1895, the French Privy Council decided to arrest the Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and to deport him to Gabon in the very hostile African rainforest, where he spent the next 7 years suffering countless atrocities that no ordinary man could bear and survive. His departure into exile is celebrated annually in Touba, his city, on 18 Safar by the Muslim community, the Grand Magal of Touba, meaning celebration in Wolof. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was subsequently deported to Mauritania from the rainforest. Now we are in the desert, in the Sahara Desert, between 1903 to 1907. Then placed under house arrest in Diourbel, another city in Senegal, from 1912 to his recall in God by 1927. So he had been in custody 32 years. After 20 years of deprivation of liberty, attempt at vexation, humiliation, deportation, torture, physical and verbal aggression, intense house arrest, and arrestation attempts, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba remained safe and sound without having fought with weapons. Instead, he used forgiveness and oblivion instead of vengeance and hatred. This is what the gate of Mouridism did, in spite of all the evil and injustice that the French colonialists had done to him. Ladies and gentlemen, Gandhi, through his unique concept of ahimsa, or nonviolence, opposed colonialism and its corollary, the violence of human rights. Gandhi's nonviolence manifested itself on several occasions during British rule in India. A few key dates will give us a quick overview. The Home Rule movement in 1916, the Non-Cooperation movement in 1921, the Salt March or Dandi March in 1930, the Quit India movement in 1942, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, in short, these figures have non-violent struggle in common. But it must be stressed that there are nuances between them. Notably, the anteriority of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba struggle compared to that Gandhi's popularized from 1921 onwards. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba distinguished himself in individual education for peace and non-violence by giving humanity the know-how and life skill to transform enemies into friends. And thus, through the effect of minority influence, transform a fractured planet into a unified one. As for Gandhi, he was able to unite an entire people and wage a war without arms against the greatest power of the time. Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is that the world needs more than ever examples of men like Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, Mbake, and Mahatma Gandhi, who showed the way to peace through non-violence and who distinguished themselves by the remedies they brought to the ills of society. They use peaceful means to rise the challenges of the extreme violence they faced. And they did so in a context that was more negative towards human rights than it is today. Young people must draw more inspiration from these models and develop a culture of peace in a world beset by multifaceted crises. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, I would like to invite His Excellency B.N. Reddy, the High Commissioner of India to Malaysia, to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam MC. Terima kasih banyak. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dato Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergot, Dean, International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC, IIUM. Yang berusaha Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, Founder, President of Malaysia-India Heritage Society. My good friend, His Excellency SCM Abdoulaye Barrow, Ambassador of Senegal. Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Osman Bakar, holder of Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology, Civilizational Studies and Renewal of ISTAC, IIUM. Excellencies, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, honorable panelists and guests, and participants of the forum of the Ahmadou Bamba, Mahatma Gandhi, the future of peace and non-violent struggles, my own colleague, First Secretary Benno Jaffin from the Indian High Commission. A very good morning, Salamat Pagi. It is indeed an honor for me to join at this event organized at this very prestigious International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC, IIUM, on this forum on Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi. It is indeed such an important coincidence in the annals of the world history that we have such two towering personalities lived at around the same time, but different parts of the world. And today, these two towering figures from our shared human history have demonstrated through their lives and actions the immense power of peace and non-violent struggles. We draw inspiration from their legacies, seeking to apply their timeless wisdom to our contemporary world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a turbulent world. Today's global landscape is marked by unabated geopolitical conflicts across regions, the consequences of which are truly far-reaching. For the first time since World War II, we are confronted with the gravest threat to international peace and security, be it the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Israel-Hamas war, and the large-scale suffering of the people of Gaza, and its wider ramifications in the Middle East. The consequences of these conflicts, though regional, have much wider implications. And this wider global impact is resulting in several other untold consequences, be it challenges to the food security, economic slowdown in vast majority of countries of the global south, quite apart from reducing our collective effort in combating the climate change. We are not just witnessing conflicts between countries, but conflicts within countries and even in human minds. It is here that today's conversation topic becomes extremely useful. In this uncertain and fragile backdrop, we are reminded of the need for promoting and inculcating the path of non-violence and promoting an international community which places its belief in fostering peace and global harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, this reminds me of my days in the permanent mission of India to the United Nations in New York, way back in 2005 to 2008 period. These were the years when India was contemplating to table a resolution in the UN General Assembly to declare the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which is the 2nd October, as the International Day of Non-Violence. As many of you would be aware that any such day declared in the United Nations must be approved through a resolution by the UN General Assembly, and for which you need to get the support of as many countries as possible. In fact, several countries have questioned us. In fact, I had the good fortune of tabling this resolution on behalf of India with my then ambassadors. Many countries have questioned our attempt by pointing that, look, we already have International Day of Peace, which is on 21st September every year. Why do you need another day of International Day of Non-Violence? So then we had to remind these countries that there are many ways to peace, but the most durable and the lasting one is through non-violence. And the one who championed the cause of non-violence, or ahimsa we call, is Mahatma Gandhi, and hence the 2nd October would be very apt to be described as the International Day of Non-Violence. I must tell you that it actually had the support of 140 countries, and finally we adopted a UN resolution in 2007 declaring the 2nd October as the International Day of Non-Violence. So the point I'm trying to make here is how important is the means to the peace, and hence the recognition that non-violence is both the right means and a panacea to see the challenges that we are facing today in the global order. Therefore, the topic for today's discussion, as I said earlier, becomes more relevant than ever before. I must applaud really the ISTAC as well as Malaysia-India Heritage Society for thinking it through and bringing the two great personalities of two different continents, but living, as I said, around the same time of the history, and preaching and propagating in their own means, in their own ways, for greater promotion of non-violence in our lives. I'm glad that today's discussion will help us understand also better how would this non-violence can help improve understandings of the peoples, not just in this our part of the world, but across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, here the enduring legacy of Mahatma Gandhi to India's freedom struggle and his universal message of non-violence continue to inspire India to begin with, as well as whole of Asia, as well as other countries. In a sense, I want to, since we're talking about this topic, the deep connect of Mahatma Gandhi's teachings in Malaysia itself, and they have a very special place. While recalling the values of Mahatma Gandhi to humanity, the first Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman, stated, and I quote, "Gandhi's name will be cherished not only by Indians, but by all who love freedom." Mahatma Gandhi has been the fountain of our inspiration in our fight for freedom. This was said in 1962 in India. I'm also happy that there are several institutions in Malaysia which reflect the Gandhian values, thereby serving as a connecting bridge, in a sense, for the people across generations between our two countries. For example, we have this Dewan Gandhi in Sungai Petani, Kedah, where Dewan Gandhi was built in 1957 by the people living in then Malaya region, by knowing that Mahatma Gandhi assassinated, so they were deeply hurt, and then they felt in memory of Mahatma Gandhi they must build a. And in fact, it is a good fortune at that time that the then Sultan of Kedah inaugurated this Dewan Gandhi. And 50 plus 6, almost 57 to now 2022, 23, the building became very old, and hence the people in Sungai Petani decided to rebuild this. And they took a lot of efforts in rebuilding this. And again, on the same day, which is the 9th November 1957, now 9th November 2023, His Royal Highness, the Sultan of Kedah, personally went to inaugurate this Dewan Gandhi in Sungai Petani. We similarly have Gandhi Memorial Trust in Kuala Lumpur. Then we have the Gandhi Memorial Park in Selangor. And then Penang Gandhi Peace Center, then the Sekolah Jenis Kebangsaan Gandhi Memorial Primary, Tamil Primary School. There are many other symbols of it there. It is important that the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi continues to guide the two countries' bilateral relations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is as a result no coincidence that, as I said earlier, both Mahatma Gandhi and Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba shared similarity of thought and worldview in a number of ways. Through their approaches, though their approaches were very different. It is well known that both leaders aspired and fought for the freedom, not by swords, but by non-violence or ahimsa. His Excellency, my good friend, Ambassador of Senegal, has brought out in very great detail the epic journey, epic struggles of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. So are the struggles of Mahatma Gandhi, who was given the title Mahatma not in India but in South Africa when he fought for the rights of the people of then South Africa. It is also well known that both, that is Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba as well as Mahatma Gandhi, believed in meditation, spiritual awakening and enlightenment. The noble ideals of these leaders helped the people of their own countries, in India as well as in Senegal, to internally unite as one identity and derive moral strength from their rich Oriental culture and civilization, thereby minimizing the social impact caused by the colonial rulers. Both leaders faced immense oppression, yet responded with dignity and non-violence. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba endured exile, imprisonment and the French colonial rule without ever inciting violence. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi led millions of Indians to fight against the British colonialism through peaceful protests, boycotts, fasting, without resorting to aggression. Therefore, their teachings remind us that true strength lies not in force, but in steadfastness and moral courage. Today, as we navigate an increasingly complex global landscape, their teachings are more relevant than ever before. We live in a world beset by conflicts, extremism, and systematic injustices. To top it all, the rise of social media and digital communication amplifies both the potential for conflict and the capacity for peaceful advocacy. Yet, amidst these challenges, there is a growing recognition of the need for peace through non-violent means for conflict resolution. I am glad that the forum on Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi seeks to celebrate their legacies, and we are reminded of the path of peace and non-violence is certainly not an easy one, but it is the most powerful and enduring way to achieve justice and harmony. Let us be guided by the enduring wisdom of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi and strive to create a future where non-violent struggles lead us to a more just and compassionate world. Before I conclude, I wish to place on record our deepest appreciation to ISTAC IIUM. Sir, it's a great idea that you brought forward, and we fully endorse this approach together with Malaysia-India Heritage Society. I must say a word about Malaysia-India Heritage Society. It is a very nascent organization which has been established to bring the true heritage that exists between India and Malaysia to the fore in a manner that we appreciate each other better, understand our shared connects of various kinds. Last year there was a major international conference organized by Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, the founder, president, and his team, very able team, they're all here. And they organized this in the Indian Cultural Center. I think we also had the great fortune of having to see Professor Emeritus Dato Osman Bakar also in that event. And I think these kind of events where we talk about such important personalities in today's context, for example, of talking about non-violence is so, so relevant. And I'm so once again glad that to be part of this journey. In this context, once again, we look forward to the erudite panelists who will soon be talking to us and have their views on this very important topic. Once again, terima kasih banyak atas undangan yang diterima oleh saya di acara ini hari ini. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen. We now invite Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Barud, accompanied by Professor Emeritus Dr. Osman Bakar and Mr. Prabhakaran Nair to be on stage for the presentation of souvenir session. Please welcome. We now call upon His Excellency Abdoulaye Barrow to be on stage to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and India Heritage Society. Please welcome. Thank you, Your Excellency. We now call upon His Excellency B.N. Reddy to be on stage to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia India Heritage Society. Please welcome. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Barud, His Excellency Abdoulaye Barrow, and His Excellency B.N. Reddy for inspiring and insightful speeches. Yes. All the dignitaries, please, back to the seat. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we will proceed to the forum session. The forum session will be moderated by Mr. Philip Matthews. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Philip Matthews to the stage. Mr. Philip Matthews is a former senior editor with the New Straits Times. He was an Assistant Director General with the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, ISIS Malaysia, during which period he once chaired a public forum at the United Nations University in Tokyo on interlinkages and environmental governance. Later, he spent a stint in Japan as a divisional head with the Tokyo-based ASEAN Productivity Organization. With a brief introduction, I now pass the floor to Mr. Philip Matthew to moderate the forum session. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, MC, for that introduction. Welcome again to this very important and significant forum. Oh dear. We have heard about the most recent shooting of Republican president candidate Donald Trump. That incident highlights the importance of forums like this and makes it current and most relevant, especially on the subject of present political struggles. We have heard speakers who have explained the aim of this conference, and now it is time to deliver. To do that, we have 4 luminaries who will have 30 minutes each to make their presentations. They actually really need no introduction. Nevertheless, I should do so very briefly. The first speaker will be Professor Emeritus Dr. Osman Baka. He will speak on the future of peace and non-violent struggles, explaining the meanings of peace and freedom which are at the heart of historical struggles of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi. He will also highlight the similarities and differences in their approach to their struggle for freedom. He will then share insights into multiple approaches to the struggle for freedom and their significance for non-violent struggles now and the future. The second speaker will be Mr. Prabhakaran Nair, whom you heard just now. He is the president of the vibrant Malaysia-India Heritage Society. He will start with a comparison between Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi in terms of their backgrounds, in terms of their respective spiritual traditions. He will also speak on the differences in orientation. He will examine the current relevance of some of their teachings for civil society, like the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Mr. Prabhakaran will be followed by Michelle Kimball, the renowned author of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, a peacemaker of our time. Michelle will start off with how Bamba witnessed the violence of the French colonialists and how he vowed to retreat from worldly and political pursuits. Instead, he chose the spiritual path, inspired as he was with Islamic tradition. Although the French felt threatened by him and exiled him, he returned and sought no vengeance. He vowed never to use a weapon against colonizers. There is more and much more. Let's hear from Michelle later. And finally, we have the fourth speaker will be Dr. Sundar Viswalingam, the founder host of SV Abhinava.org. He will examine several questions, namely, did Mahatma Gandhi invent satyagraha? Was it an ancient tradition that he rediscovered for himself? 2, Was nonviolence primarily a political tactic? 3. Would a similar movement have been successful in Nazi Germany or Dutch Indonesia? And many, many other probing questions. Later, I shall say a little bit more about each speaker before they are called upon to make their presentations. At the end of the session, of course, we shall have a time of question and answers. If any of you are so inclined, you can just pass me your written questions. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, the first speaker will be Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Osman Bakar, and let me introduce him a little bit further. Dr. Osman Bakar holds a doctorate in Islamic philosophy from Temple University in USA. He currently holds the Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies at ISTAC IIUM. An emeritus professor at the University of Malaya, he specializes in the philosophy of science. Previously, he served as distinguished professor and director at the Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Center for Islamic Studies in Brunei, and the Malaysia Chair of Islam in Southeast Asia at the Prince Talal Al Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. He has authored 44 books, including the well-acclaimed book on Islam and Confucianism, a civilizational dialogue. His writings have been translated into 10 languages: Arabic, Turkish, Persian, Japanese, Chinese, Bosnian, Urdu, Bengali, Spanish, and Italian. Prof. Osman is a well-recognized scholar in Islamic mysticism and thought. Acclaimed globally, he has been listed among the 500 most influential Muslims since 2009. His more recent works delve into environmental wisdom and colonialism in the Malay archipelago. Professor Osman, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Can you hear me well at the back? Good. Respected Mr. Moderator, Philip Matthew, Professor Abdul Aziz Bergut, the Dean of ISTAC, His Excellencies, the High Commissioner of India to Malaysia, Mr. Reddy, and the Ambassador of Senegal to Malaysia, His Excellency Abdoulaye Barrow, my fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to follow up, although the Dean has already extended his appreciation to the two ambassadors and the speakers. I also would like to take this opportunity, especially on behalf, basically as holder of the auxiliary chair, to thank all the various people who have been able to contribute to help us organize this thing. First of all, actually, I just want to say that when I suggested to Brother Prava, some time back, and we have been talking actually about this newly registered Malaysia India Heritage Society, with which I'm associated, thanks to him. And I really appreciate His Excellency Reddy and His Excellency Barrow for kindly accepting our invitation. I feel happy and proud that we Malaysians are able to have a forum on two figures, two icons, who are not from Malaysia, but from two different continents. So I'm happy because it shows that we are opening up our minds. So we are not talking about the closing of the Malaysian mind, but the opening of the Malaysian mind. I hope to be more open. We choose a topic, the future of peace and non-violent struggle, for the very reasons that have been already mentioned. I don't want to repeat that, so I just want to go straight to the title. Basically, I will not be talking in details about the two heroes, the two historical figures. I leave that to for example, for Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, we have a real authority on the subject. Sister Farah Michel, who published a very well-researched book. In fact, some of you may want to know that it was the bestseller in America. So I was happy that I was invited by her to write a foreword to that book. So to make simple for me, maybe I just quote here and there from the foreword, because many of you I suppose, have not read that foreword. So I thought some parts of that foreword are worth me repeating, and that. And of course, my approach will be a comparative one. I would like to look at the two icons, put them in their proper context. And now let's view them from our present context. What is their significance for us, humanity today, and for humanity tomorrow? Because their struggle provide historical lessons, perennial lessons, I would say. All right. On the surface of things, it's as if then we are talking about two different people having more dissimilarities rather than similarities. But I would say, knowing these two figures, about their life history, their struggle, about the conditions of the world, I think it is my view that they share more similarities. Even simply, I would say, I could just talk about the two by discussing about their names, their birth names, their honorific titles, and their struggle. There'll be enough to know, basically, how close they are. Let me concentrate on it. First of all, I asked to see, I don't know whether you can read that. First of all, in this case, I just want to show the tributes paid by great scholars today to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. One from Syed Hossein Nasar, University Professor of Islamic Studies, the George Washington University, said, referring to the great Sufi master of the Senegal's late 19th and early 20th century. Now, to be called Sheikh, Sufi Sheikh, the Sufi master, from the Islamic point of view, that is a very, very grand thing, big thing. And then you have from the well-known, who is very popular now, Sheikh, Hakim Murad, at Cambridge. He refers to the great luminary, spiritual luminary of Africa. Then Eric Ross, Professor Eric Ross, who is now in Morocco at the University Al Akhwan in Morocco. He talks about placing Ahmadou Bamba among the ranks of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. So that is the person. I presented this because between the two, we in Malaysia know Mahatma Gandhi much better than Ahmadou Bamba. In fact, I came to know Ahmadou Bamba only more recently. I know better the spiritual order, the Sufi order that he founded. It's only that now the order is more famous than the founder. You've forgotten who founded that, the Muridia order. Yeah? Ahmadou Bamba was the founder of the Muridia Sufi order. Okay, but in the case of Gandhi, in school we already learn about Gandhi. We learn from school in the history subject. What do we know? Remember the full name. And it is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. We know that when we were in school, but we have never heard that. We have never heard of Ahmadou Bamba. I just want to talk about their names. First of all, their birth name. Their birth name, because Mahatma is not the birth name. There's an honorific title given to him. So, but some of us don't know that. But I said, Mohandas. Now, what does Mohandas mean? Well, nowadays people don't care. They have names, but they don't care much about their names. But we should know what's the meaning. That's a very important name. All right? It's a beautiful name. It derives from Sanskrit. Mohandas, the servant of Mohan. Those who can correct me. But Mohandas means the servant of Mohan. And Mohan is another name of one of the deities, the Hindu deities, Krishna. But the point is, it is equivalent to one of the names of Allah. The beautiful name, the enchanting, the one that attract. It conveys a wide range of meaning, Mohan. That's why we named Mohan. Yeah? That's the name. It's a beautiful name. It is spiritually related. It is spiritual. Now, in the case of Ahmadou, of course, Ahmad is spelled. In Malaysia, they don't spell Ahmadou. They say Ahmad. But Ahmadou, that is the correct Arabic, Ahmadou. Then, in other words, showing the comparative and the superlative. It means praiseworthy, or the more praiseworthy, the most praiseworthy. That is Ahmadou. Muhammad is related to Ahmad. But Muhammad is the exoteric name of the Prophet. Ahmad is the exoteric name of the Prophet. Or to say, Muhammad is a popular name, more popular name. But Ahmad, we know that Muslims know very well that in the Quran, the Prophet Jesus prophesied the coming of Ahmad. And that Ahmad refers to Muhammad. So in other words, his father, Bamba's father, gave that name, which is very, very significant, which already anticipates the kind of the inner life, the inner attraction, the soul. In other words, something to do with the soul of Bamba, that he was named Ahmad. Now, what's the link between Ahmad and Mohandas? That's very interesting. There's closer affinity in that, between Ahmad or Ahmadou, as the Senegalese would have it, and Muhammad. Now, what is Bamba? I checked with Sister Michelle. What is the meaning of Bamba in Senegalese? Now, His Excellency can check. I forgot to ask you the other day. Then it means teacher. There is a town in Senegal, Bamba, which means the teacher. So again, it's related to the question of knowledge, to be teacher. All the great spiritual figures have been teachers. Now, we refer to the honorific title. Honorific title. Why is the honorific title in the case of Gandhi? It's Mahatma. Mahatma. The Malays had a long period of civilization under the Hindu influence. They adopted Hinduism. So the two words, Sanskrit, it's a combination of two Sanskrit words. Maha. Maha means big. In Malay, Maha today is great, big. Maha. Maha, dunia Maha mulia. Yang dari Pertuan Agong, Maha. Maha refers to greatness, grandeur. Maha. In Indonesia, professor, they call Maha Guru. So in Malaysia, I'll be Maha Guru Osman. Not professor. Yes, but the other one, Atma. So it's combination of two words, Maha and Atma. In ancient, in classical Malay, before Islam. In the Sufi, in Hindu, India psychology, you want to refer to the nafs, the soul. You do what? Atma. Atma refers to the soul. So Mahatma, the great soul. So that is an honorific title of Gandhi. Now, why is the corresponding one in the case of Ahmadou Bamba? Sheikh. Sheikh. There is an honorific title. That's not his birth name. Sheikh. Of course, Sheikh has a wide meaning, as the dean knows very well. He's the Sheikh. I can refer. But not forget, one of the meanings of Sheikh is referring to for example, the Sufi master, the master. In the case of Ibn Arabi, they call Akbar, the great Sheikh. Yeah? It's again something to do with spiritual eminence. Spiritual eminence in terms of basically the one with the great soul, the one with the pure soul. So you have that another. It's quite close. The Sheikh and Mahatma, if you look from the spiritual point of view. So I can see you know, these two icons, very, very interesting. They not only share common features in the exterior sense, but not even in the spiritual sense. They were closer together. So basically, you know, that first I want to say about these two figures. They are closer than we thought. I just want here to speak here now about, as I said, to select, to quote some of the things that I mentioned about Bamba. I will not go into detail because Sister Michelle will do that. But I just want to share with you what, for example, I've mentioned about this Bamba, the significance of Bamba. I said, well, Sheikh Bamba is a man of peace. He's a man of peace. Because the title of Sister Michelle's book is A Peacemaker for Our Time. A man of peace, not only because we from the outside try to appreciate his stature. But when we are out of saying this towards at the end of my presentation, but I just do it now. In other words, the significance of Bamba, of Ahmad Bamba, is as a man of peace, because he chose peace and non-violence as a way of life, just as Gandhi chose that as a way of life. It is not, peace and non-violence is not an issue in such a way that from time to time we organize seminars and conferences on the theme of peace. And in the case of the, you know very well, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, this has become a joke maybe, you know, so we award more this special prize and the Nobel Prize winner, but the more wars and violence we have. So something wrong with our world. So it's a man of peace. That he is indeed such a kind of man is obvious enough to anyone familiar with his life and thought. The philosophy of life he ardently believed in, and the spiritual life he intensely led. This, you can see this in Sister Michelle's book. Now, let me say something. Why in the case of two icons, particularly here, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, is leading a piece of life. In other words, it is a way of life that he led from the beginning, ever since he became a follower of Sufism. He became, in other words, he tread on the path, the spiritual path. That's it. Never deviated from that path until the end of his life. Because his philosophy was, there are two types of jihad, struggle. In Arabic, in Islam, the word struggle is best translated by the word jihad. Now, but then his concept of jihad is not the jihad of ISIS and Daesh and that. It was different between the jihad being shouted on the street by so many Muslims today. There are two types of jihad, the greater jihad and the smaller jihad. Jihadul Akbar, Jihadul Asghar. Two. It is quite interesting, in some ways paradoxical, that this man of jihad is living a way of peace. He's taking that the best way, the best of jihad, the greater jihad, is that fighting against the inner soul that influences us to do violence, to do whatever it is. In other words, the way of life that Sheikh Bamba led was the way of jihad, which is in terms of the impact, it's not the one that we see, the wars, the fighting on the battlefield, but the fighting that is going on within our soul. And of course, that is not the characteristic of Sheikh Bamba alone. That is, of course, the philosophy of Sufism. Because, in fact, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that when he came back from the battle, he said, we are now fighting the greater war. And when he was asked what is that, there is the jihad against the nafs, jihad al-nafs. So this is what generally Islam speaks of two types of jihad. One is physical jihad that takes the form of self-defense or physical struggle, be it armed or otherwise, to thwart off eternal aggression and defeat the enemy on the battlefield. In the face of external aggression against their homeland or their community, Muslims are enjoined by their religion to fight against this aggression. The other is spiritual jihad, which takes the form of inner struggle against forces within one's soul, nafs, that tend to make one exactly inclined to do evil or commit blameworthy acts that will be detrimental not only to oneself but also to others. Clearly then, the former jihad is collective in nature, while the latter is essentially individual, which is, of course, throughout life. This is, I mentioned that here, and Sheikh Bamba's jihad is instructive for our present time because it stands in stark contrast to the so-called jihad that is now being waged globally by many individuals and groups in the name of Islam, to the point of justifying violence, terror, killings, and murders when these acts are clearly against the teachings of their religion. So this is important for us, that especially for Muslims. There's a message that Sheikh Bamba is sending to the Muslims. In the case of Sheikh Bamba, of course, his followers, there are many members of the Muridiyah order until today, and they lead a life that places emphasis on this peace, the inner peace. All right, how many minutes more? I need 5 minutes. No, I have to. All right, that's only 5 minutes. I want to, because I want to talk about some of the significance of the message of peace and non-violence of the two icons for our present world. You can see that many of you may realize that, especially in the West, there are many peace studies now in new centers set up to undertake peace studies. And I'm quite aware of that, especially after September 11 in America. You have centers mushrooming, doing peace studies. But how strange it is that these new centers undertaking peace studies, first of all, they do not refer at all to the peace struggle, non-violent struggle of Ahmadou Bamba and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. Maybe some refer to Martin Luther King because it's in America, but the point is no lessons, no effort is made to learn from their struggle. I would say that anybody who wants to set up a peace studies center should also have a brief history of peace movements throughout the world. Then we'll be able to see how the two. Of course, the historical context in the case of Bamba and Gandhi were colonialism. In the case of Bamba, it was French colonialism. In the case of Gandhi, it is a British colonialism. But yes, there are differences between the two colonialism. There are also these commonalities. But what is important is to understand what the significance of human nature. I think if you want to think about the future of peace, and urban struggle, we need to basically reflect on human nature. Is human nature really human nature is violent? Is it violent? Is it aggressive? That? But why is really more fundamental than that? Human nature is peace. That's what Bamba would say, and he would refer to his own religion, Islam. Islam means submission and peace, and peace results from submission to the transcendent order, power. Let's see, and we know very well. We cannot really understand Mahatma Gandhi, unless we understand the spiritual tradition within Hinduism from which he came. And yet, two different spiritual orders, Islam and Hinduism, produced two figures that are almost identical in terms of the dual view. I think that's great. That's food for thought, especially for Malaysia as a multi-ethnic country, multi-religious country. This is very, very, very important for me. So that is as far as for the future. So of course there are other levels that we can learn, but the point is to conclude my presentation. We can derive many great lessons in our struggle against forces of evil. In our struggle against the forces of evil, it doesn't matter what that form is, what that force of evil is. We are appealing to a deep conscience, the deep conscious nature that we are made for peace, that we have been created for peace. And we believe that given the right approach, given the wisdom, the wisdom, inshallah, we can transcend. We can transcend our ethnic identity, our religion, to arrive at that universal wisdom, which will unite all of us. Perhaps one just more, Philip. The only thing I'm worried now, as we look at our present and future humanity, I'm talking about the future. I see now the clash between natural, what I call natural and artificial intelligence. I don't know how you see it, but with some fiction, now our world is moving in that direction in which there will be greater clashes between artificial intelligence and natural intelligence. What will be the future of natural intelligence when we see now artificial intelligence is being used now in wars as instrument? The face of wars in the future can change drastically. The future of wars in which there is more greater role played by artificial intelligence. Based on the premise that when you fight wars in the name of using artificial intelligence, they claim that they can minimize casualties, collateral damage will be minimized. Direct, it's only the combatants. Is it so? Well, that's food for thought for the future. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Professor Emeritus Dr. Osman Baka, for the insightful presentation, and please remain on the stage. Now, I am respectfully invite all the two panelists, Mr. Prabhakaran Nair and Michelle Kimball, to be on the stage for the forum session. And also Mr. Sunkar. Now, I will pass the forum session to the moderator.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker is S. Prabhakaran Nair. He is the founder president of the Persatuan Warisan Malaysia Akan Barat, or the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. He was trained in social sciences at University Science Malaysia in Penang in 1978. He then completed a course in the School of Archival Studies in New Delhi in 1985 and later graduated with distinction from the University College London in 1993. He pursues the vision of peace and unity in the context of Malaysia-India relations outside the framework of politics and divisive ideologies. His passion is to explore and promote shared historical heritage as well as diplomacy, reform, and civilizing values across cultures. In his quest, he uses Malaysia and India as models. He was the director of National Heroes Center within the National Archives of Malaysia. He has published historical biographies, including A Prince Among Men about the first Malaysian Prime Minister, Tunku Abdul Rahman, King Gus, a man of his time, about the Malaysian iconic Minister of Foreign Affairs, and still the greatest Malaysian, also about Tunku Abdul Rahman. He was also the author of the Journal of Malaysian Biographies. Mr. Prabhakaran, the floor is yours.
Friends, allow me at the outset to repeat how proud the Malaysia-India Heritage Society is to join ISTAC in celebrating the lives and legacies of two great apostles of non-violence, Ahmadou Bamba, the revered Sufi saint from Senegal, whose spiritual and moral leadership has guided the path of his followers, and Mahatma Gandhi, the icon of India's freedom struggle, whose relentless pursuit of truth and its application to the struggle for freedom inspired not just a nation but the entire world. These luminaries, although separated by geography and culture, share common threads that bind their narratives together. It is a narrative not of swords or guns, but of the human spirit driven by love, devotion, and service, both to man and God. let us delve into the fascinating similarities between Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi before we go on to look at the differences, followed by the relevance to us in the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Great leaders in history have often been shaped by powerful forces in their formative years. Make no mistake, I'm referring to the role of women in the lives of these great men. Mahatma Gandhi frequently attributed his principles of non-violence to his beloved mother, Putlibai. Her devout Jain practices of non-violence, fasting, prayers, acts of charity, and self-discipline deeply shaped Gandhi's moral compass, non-violence, and resilience in the face of adversity. Similarly, Ahmadou Bamba drew profound inspiration from his mother, Mam Jara Busso, known for her spiritual wisdom and piety. Her guidance was responsible for his deep-rooted commitment to peace, education, and service to others. She imbued him with spiritual purity, humility, and unwavering perseverance, which became guiding principles in Bamba's advocacy for non-violence, educational empowerment, and social reform throughout his life. Both of these mothers would often captivate their children with tales of saints and heroes, weaving narratives that instilled a profound sense of moral duty in their young minds. Thanks to mother's love and guidance, both Gandhi and Bamba were nurtured within the embrace of their respective spiritual traditions. This spiritual tradition is very important. I think Dr. Sundar will also be dealing with that. Bamba was heir to Senegalese Sufi tradition, while Gandhi was heir to the broad spiritual tradition of India, which combines Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. To compare Gandhi and Bamba, it is essential to examine these two spiritual contexts into which they were born and nurtured. Sufi traditions emphasize non-violence. As reflected in the Hadith, the ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. Sufi teachings emphasize inner spiritual experience and appreciation of truth wherever it may be found. We have the example of Sufi mystics like Jalaluddin Rumi, who said, the lamps may be different, but the light is the same, suggesting that while religious forms may differ, the divine essence is one and the same. Another Sufi, Ibn Arabi, wrote, "My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for the gazelles and a convent for the Christian monks and the Kaaba of the pilgrim and the tables of the Torah and the book of the Quran." Gandhi was influenced by Jainism and its deep respect for life. The Akaranga Sutra, a Jain text, states, "All beings are fond of life. They like pleasure. They dislike pain. They shun destruction. They have lived for life. They long to live. To all, life is dear." In the words of Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, non-violence is the highest religion. It's interesting to note that Gandhi's non-violent protest has homegrown roots. In the place where he was born, that is Kathiawar in Gujarat, anyone could start fasting or even just sit outside the palace just in order to rouse the ruler's attention and compassion. Despite the influence of culture and tradition, it must be acknowledged that the greater influences on Gandhi's non-violence comes largely from sources outside the Indic tradition. Gandhi's outlook was cosmopolitan and influenced by the writings of Leo Tolstoy, Thoreau, and Ruskin. He was also impressed by the non-violent, non-political civil rights movement led by Emmeline Pankhurst in London. Although Bamba and Gandhi were apostles of non-violence, they did not journey together on the same path. Gandhi's quest for truth was deeply personal and experiential. In contrast, Bamba's journey was more traditional and linear, nurtured in the womb of the great Sufi tradition. True to tradition, Ahmadou Bamba emphasized the role of spiritual guides or mentor, or what you call guru in Hinduism. This is similar to the Indic tradition in which the guru is important in one's acquisition of divine knowledge. However, despite this similarity in the background, the Mahatma believed that true wisdom is not to be found through mediators or intermediaries alone. It must be discovered through the lived experiences of everyday life. He carved his own path in his search for truth, drawing guidance from his own inner moral compass. Unlike Gandhi's restless spirit, which kept him engrossed in his search for answers, Bamba's unwavering faith and devotion allowed him to follow a more traditional monastic path of certitude. Despite his deep spirituality, Gandhi did not claim to have final answers. He kept searching for truth, sometimes contradicting himself as he moved along from a lesser truth to a higher truth. Although they both chose the path of non-violence, there was a clear difference in their methods. Bamba chose non-involvement in dealing with the colonizer, while Gandhi was uncompromising in his negotiations, which were deeply political in nature. Bamba's jihad was not actively directed against anybody. On the contrary, his struggle was directed inwards, towards his own community. He believed in the transformational power of Islamic spirituality and its rich intellectual tradition of cultivating a civilized citizenry. And in this, he even sought the cooperation of the French authorities. He dedicated himself to cultivating and strengthening Senegalese identity and resilience, offering it as an exemplary model for society. He gave importance to education, hard work, and productivity, as well as cultural and spiritual resilience as a vanguard against colonialism. He created a friendly wall that protected his community and its independence. At the same time, he demonstrated a degree of pragmatism in dealing with the colonizer. Bamba did not perceive the French as enemies or as invaders. Instead, he preferred to view them through the lens of shared Abrahamic traditions as people of the book and transient guests at a grand Senegalese feast where the true splendor lay in the rich tapestry of their own culture and heritage. Gandhi, on the other hand, advocated civil disobedience and non-cooperation against the colonizers. He organized active protests and agitations. He organized public boycotts of British goods. He urged boycott of elections to the Legislative Council, shutting down of schools, businesses, and government offices, mass walkout of students from schools, colleges, and universities across India, withdrawal from police and army, and non-payment of taxes to the British government. All said and done, neither Ahmadou Bamba nor Mahatma Gandhi harbored any hatred or rancor towards the colonizers. Friends, times are not the same. Ideas are changing. Today, as independent nations, we speak the language of diplomacy, which is an extension of the concept of non-violence. We have cast the intruder from our home, engaging with them not through force, but diplomatic channels. Diplomacy between nations often encounters political obstacles, yet cultural centers affiliated with embassies possess the potential to transcend these barriers. They serve as pivotal hubs for fostering connections across political and ideological divides, thereby smoothing the often contentious edges of international relations. Civil society organizations within host countries play a crucial role in nurturing these essential connections. To effectively advance diplomatic efforts, these organizations must adhere rigorously to the guiding principles of diplomacy enforced diligently by their leaders. This commitment ensures that cultural diplomacy thrives, promoting mutual understanding and cooperation despite political challenges. The Malaysia-India Heritage Society exemplifies a commitment to fostering the shared historical heritage of Malaysia and India while keeping its doors open to the cultural legacies of other nations. We prioritize a non-political and non-ideological approach, cultivating an environment conducive to natural problem solving. Guided by the wisdom and ideals of visionary leaders like Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi, we strive to promote unity and understanding through cultural exchange and collaboration. What are these areas of convergence between the ideas of these great leaders and the Malaysia-India Heritage Society? First and foremost, despite being a small group, we believe that we can and must bring about positive transformation of society. We draw inspiration from both Gandhi and Bamba, who believed strongly in the power of small groups. In the case of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, his ideas on small group or community and social change were deeply influenced by the teaching of Islam and Sufism. He was principally guided by the Quranic verse which says, "And let there arise from amongst you a community, inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right, and eschewing what is wrong, and those will be successful." This is from Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 104. Bamba formed small groups for the education and spiritual training of his followers in the belief that personal transformation through spiritual education was the first step towards broader social change. The brotherhood was decentralized and local leaders guided small communities, providing spiritual and practical guidance at a personalized level. Known as Tarbiyah, these groups were aimed at creating a disciplined, morally upright, and spiritually enlightened community capable of withstanding external pressures and contributing positively to society. Bamba also created agricultural communities where his followers could work the land and enjoy economic independence. The importance of small groups is also reflected in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, in his words, a small group of determined and like-minded people can change the course of history. This belief is reflected in the small, self-sufficient communities that Mahatma Gandhi formed in both South Africa as well as India with a view to transforming the larger society. His vision and his methods for achieving this were deeply rooted in the principles of non-violence, self-reliance, and ethical living. He established ashrams as models of ideal communities, and these included the Tolstoy Farm and Phoenix Settlement in South Africa, as well as Sabarmati Ashram in Gujarat and Sevagram Ashram in Maharashtra. They served as experimental communities where residents shared responsibilities and resources, promoting a sense of unity and cooperation. Why curse darkness when you can light a candle? This profound question brings us to the second point of convergence between Ahmadou Bamba, Gandhi, and the Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Gandhi and Ahmadou Bamba have taught us to light a candle, not just to guide our steps, but to offer a beacon for others. It is a lesson in non-violence. By lighting candles rather than cursing the darkness, we foster friendship and gain acceptance, crucial ingredients for driving meaningful change in a non-violent manner. Gandhi and Bamba tried to establish new social and moral order to complement what was already in place. They did not seek to supplant or eliminate the existing system of education, health, or democratic governance. Their approach in building a parallel system without actively seeking to bring down the existing systems offers a lesson in gradualism. This approach of creating change through force of example and offering a model of change and recommending adjustments to the existing system rather than working to directly to pull them down is of special relevance for us today as a small group. I should think that in our post-colonial era of cultural diplomacy, Ahmadou Bamba's model of cooperation over confrontation provides a crucial blueprint for change. The Malaysia-India Heritage Society embraces Bamba's approach. The society imposes restrictions or self-censorship on attempts to pull down or directly condemn any prevailing social, political, economic, or moral order. Instead, we seek to gain acceptance of our ideals by presenting an alternative. Thirdly, the Malaysia-India Heritage Society is an apolitical organization, a choice inspired by the ideals of both Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi. Ahmadou Bamba operated completely outside of conventional politics, avoiding direct political engagement. He believed that moral and spiritual resilience, rather than political action, was the true catalyst for change. Bamba was only 20 years old when he convinced his father to renounce direct involvement in the affairs of the court. He even said, "If my father does not leave the king, I have no choice but to go my own way." After his father's death, Bamba and his followers distanced themselves from the royal court by moving away to a different place, far from political machinations. As for Mahatma Gandhi, he had a complex relationship with politics. We know that Gandhi was deeply involved in political agitation, but he acted only as leader of a mass movement. His mission was moral and spiritual, transcending party politics, as in the case of Bamba. The Congress provided a platform for Gandhi to mobilize the masses for India's freedom. But he often expressed discomfort with the internal dynamics of the party and wanted to pursue his reform agenda outside of party politics. He could sense greed for power among his compatriots. He then resigned from formal leadership within the Congress and decided to work directly with the people. In important political negotiations, such as with Jinnah or the British, he represented himself and not any political party. Fourthly, Malaysia-India Heritage Society does not align itself with any particular religious or ideological stance, in line with the approach taken by Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi. Ahmadou Bamba protected religion from misuse, ensuring it was not used to interfere in governance or political affairs. This does not mean that religion has no place in public arena. Core values that guide followers of all religions in the path of virtues are universally relevant and can bridge any divide, including religious divide. At the Malaysia-India Heritage Society, we strive to highlight the core essence of all religions across diverse cultural expressions. By celebrating this universal spiritual heritage, we aim to connect not just Malaysia and India, but humanity as a whole. Friends, the teachings of Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi stand as timeless beacons, guiding us towards a more harmonious and enlightened world. The Malaysia-India Heritage Society, dedicated to promoting shared cultural heritage and goodwill, embodies the essence of what Bamba and Gandhi stood for. Let us carry forward the torch of their wisdom, lighting candles of hope and compassion in the darkest corners of the world. In so doing, we not only pay tribute to their enduring legacies, but also forge a future where peace, justice, and unity prevail. Together, let us continue walking the path they have shown us, guided by the eternal truths that bind us as one global family. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabha. All right, so we are now all ready to listen to Michelle Kimball. Michelle is a researcher, a director, and author of the widely acclaimed book Ahmadou Bamba, a peacemaker for our time. This book delves into the elements that help to maintain peace, social and political balance in the nation of Senegal. This is one of the few West African nations to have escaped large-scale political and ethnic violence since its independence in 1960. Political scientists believe that the country's stability can be directly attributed to the balance of power between the Senegalese government and the disciples of the spiritual orders. With 20 years of experience across a broad range of educational, communications, and management subjects, Michelle achieves high-level results, winning several awards. Her other areas of expertise include public speaking and presentation, verbal and written communication, project management, PR, digital marketing, corporate and media communications, leadership, and many more. She has also founded an international peace project for educational outreach, of which she will be telling us more. Thank you very much. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Did you want your computer? Oh, okay. Maybe I can just move this to get this one here. Put it there. Thank you. Just so this doesn't fall off. Sorry. Okay, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to be here with you all. I want to thank you to the Dean of ISTAC, Datuk Dr. Bergut, Professor Osman Bakr, organizers at ISTAC, distinguished emissaries, panelists, and guests. I'm going to just briefly give you a background of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, who was born in 1853 and died in 1927. For comparison, Gandhi was born in 1869 and died in 1948. So Gandhi was born 15 or so years after Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and they were contemporaries, but apparently they did not know each other. For Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in Africa, slavery had mostly ended, but people were still reeling from that tragic event. The scars were still there, and now the French colonialists were making their way and their presence felt in Senegal, similar to the British in India. So the French were going ahead with their French civilizing mission, thereby marginalizing African art, religion, economy, Islamic education, and uprooting any opposition to French sovereignty. They were exploiting African resources, acacia gum for pharmaceuticals that they were sending back to France. The new governor of the colony was Louis Faidherbe, founder of France's colonial empire in Africa. And the French wanted to span their control, not just in Senegal, but all the way from Senegal to the Red Sea in Africa. So as a child, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba witnessed the brutality of the French colonialist forces, and the Senegalese jihadist groups also were infighting. His little sister, Fatih Mbake, was kidnapped by slave raiders and sold into slavery. His father's village, Mbakebal, was set on fire. His uncle Buso's village was attacked, Jollof was attacked when he was 10 years old. And so this is not all by the French, but there was a lot of infighting. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's early education, now in spite of all of this, he did manage to have a good Islamic education. And he completed his memorization of the Quran at a young age. He studied fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence with his father, and then studied ulum ad-din, the Islamic sciences, ulum al-arabiya, the sciences of the Arabic language. And this early scholarship into the Islamic sciences would be the foundation for his own writings and teachings by which he would later inspire so many others. So he began to write books early on, well, in his teens, on adab, spiritual etiquette, Islamic practices, Islamic orthodox principles, writings glorifying God in praise of the Prophet, teaching lessons, invocations, and he became a scholar of Islamic intellectual and spiritual tradition. Many books that Bamba wrote were commentaries and versifications of texts of very well-known scholars such as Al-Ghazali, Abdul Qadir Jilani, Al-Bushairi, As-Sanusi, Ibn Arabi, Hassan al-Basri, Al-Junaid, Mansur al-Halaj, Abu Hassan al-Shadili, Ibn Atala. So there's a lyrical beauty to his writings. Anybody who has, read them or is familiar with them will know that they're sung and chanted. So all his teachings, they're not just read, they're usually chanted. And in the town of Tuba, when I was there, these chants were going on nonstop over the loudspeakers. So Bamba managed to gain many followers to come and learn from him. And he clearly had an aura of wisdom about him. There was another fellow, Ibrahim Fall, who was a herald for Bamba and supported Bamba throughout all his endeavors. The French started to get very suspicious of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba due to the numbers of people around him. The French didn't want other people to have big followings or to listen. They wanted the attention of everybody. They didn't want other people to be getting that attention. The French felt very threatened by all the people that were going and flocking to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. The French thought that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was building up an army and was going to have a jihad against them. There were many resistance fighters in Senegal, Maba Jakuba, and as the ambassador mentioned, Omar Tall before. And so the French had a lot to do with in that manner. And the French, because their power was greater, they were able to subdue all of the opposition, and including King Lat Dior, who was perhaps one of their biggest opponents, and who said he would fight to the death against the French colonialists, which he did do. And when King Lat Dior died, he was really like the last resistance fighter left in Senegal. And except for Ahmadou Bamba was threatening to the French, but not because he had any violent intentions, nor did he have any aspiration to fight against the French at all. So he was completely nonviolent, but the French maintained their perceptions that he was trying to wage a war against them and that he was building up arms. In fact, they went to his compound to find the arms to be able to prove that he was collecting arms and people to fight. They couldn't find anything, but they did find people grinding wheat. And they said, aha, they're grinding wheat for jihad, for provisions. Of course, this was not true. So Bamba never really openly, fought against the French at all, but he did not recognize the sovereignty of the French over God. This was a big problem for the French. In May 1903, Bamba's insistence on God as his sole master prompted the authorities to post the following urgent telegram to France. Urgent, Marabout, spiritual leader, Ahmadou Bamba, is making it known that he recognizes no other master but God, and he refuses to be summoned for an interview. Situation particularly serious, très grave. So he was soon after arrested, and he was sent on another exile. He was exiled twice. first to Gabon and then to Mauritania. So when the French accused Ahmadou Bamba of waging jihad, he said to them, he said, "Oh, yes, I am waging a war, jihad. Indeed, you're right, because I am really combating my soul for the face of the Lord. But I am waging my jihad through knowledge, ilm, and fearing the Lord, taqwa, as a humble subject of God and the servant of his prophet. And the Lord who oversees everything may assuredly bear witness thereof. While others hold material weapons to be feared, my two weapons are knowledge and worship. And this is surely my way of fighting." So the violence that he saw around him, including seeing his own friends shot dead by Lat Dior's soldiers, shaped his thinking to be dedicated to peace, Islam, and nonviolence, and not to be concerned with worldly matters. This was a turning point in his life when he found these people who had been shot. And his contribution to the cause of peace, Islam, and nonviolence was through education, religious and agricultural communities. He encouraged agricultural communities for self-sufficiency and the religious communities to spread the teachings of Islam. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was quietly spreading and reviving Islamic teachings and bringing social change nonviolently. As our other speakers have said, he had no, he was not involved in politics at all. So he was not confrontational to the French, but he was a powerful enough force without being violent. I think this is what Gandhi was talking about in talking about satyagraha and the truth force. This force of nonviolence, when it's backed by the truth, is very powerful. So the French were convinced that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was raising up an army, which he was not, and they just wanted to get rid of him. And rather than assassinate him, which they came close to doing, they exiled him thousands of miles away where no one could go to find him very easily or reach him or get in touch with him. He was exiled to the Congo in Gabon in very difficult circumstances, and he had 7 years of very treacherous, difficult situation, which he called, tribulations. So, and when he was sent off, the French and many other people thought, well, he may not come back again, because previous political prisoners had been sent to Gabon, and they indeed did not come back, like Samori Touré. So people didn't know when he was there in the beginning whether he was dead or alive, but after a few years, there was communication going back and forth. And in seven years, he finally was able to come back, and that was considered a miracle in itself that he survived. But the interesting thing is, had it not been for the extreme trials and with the French ready to kill him, he could not have developed the spiritual fortitude to remain strong in the face of so much persecution. And this is what we see with Gandhi, what he had to go through, and all the so-called heroes throughout the ages have had to go through harrowing trials. The prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, Isa, Moses, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was not interested in resisting the French with physical violence. And he had a divine mandate of nonviolence, to not take up arms under any circumstances. And that doesn't mean he was opposed to the use of violence at all times, but that he was certain that his mandate was not to use violence. He believed he had a different direction and that God was guiding him towards it. So much so was Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's commitment to nonviolence that he stated I have agreed to certain conditions with God, such that even if the Mahdi, that is the end-time Redeemer, descends to earth, I would not assist him in battle. I will not kill neither scorpion nor serpent, nor anything that is living. According to the direction I have taken, it is absolutely forbidden for me to shoot from a weapon, such that even if the Mahdi were to arrive, and if I were to take up arms, my mission would be lost. That's his commitment to nonviolence. So, one of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's greatest wishes amidst his trials and tribulations was to become near and like the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, particularly the ones at the Battle of Badr, the very brave and courageous ones, in which the Muslims were outnumbered, but through divine intervention, they prevailed. The fact that he was so committed to nonviolence, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, but, and I think this is very interesting, the valiant warriors of the early Muslims, particularly the brave warriors at the Battle of Badr, were his role models. Now, they were involved in a physical battle, and he was totally committed to nonviolence. So, what does this mean? To me, it proves that truth is the ideal, no matter whether there's a physical battle or a purely spiritual one. I believe truth is an essential element for both peace and nonviolence. The theme of the entire Quran is there are many themes, but truth is a prevailing one. So while Bamba was being taken as a prisoner by the French colonialists, he stated that the French thought he was their prisoner. They were taking him away, their soldiers. But he said he knew otherwise. In those moments, when he was being taken by the French soldiers, he said that he actually was walking in spirit with the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, the companions of Badr. He had that level of peace at that moment when here they were taking him away, perhaps to his death. So there, he knew there was a greater purpose for his life, and there's a transcendence beyond the physical struggle that all these men experienced, like Gandhi. You know, he was able to be a leader. He understood the transcending power behind what he was doing. And other people are not of that, you know, level necessarily to be able to follow in his footsteps. So Gandhi inspired many people, but there are not so many that could really follow him without having been taught by him. So in Surah Al-Isra, chapter 17, verse 62, and we will surely test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lies, fruits, but give good tidings to the patient. So the companions of Badr, who Bamba stood with when arrested by the French, had all been fighters in the physical battles, jihad, but were his role models in this nonviolent jihad for their courage, bravery, and dedication. So I think, you know, Gandhi also mentions the need for courage, bravery, and dedication, even if it's not a physical battle. So the truth is the overriding principle, whether a physical battle to protect the oppressed or a spiritual battle of transformation. So, of course, there are times when physical force needs to be used in defense and in upholding the truth and saving lives and not causing harm. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, waited 13 years before physically fighting his opponents so that the community would not be annihilated. So there are examples of nonviolent warriors in Islam. Gandhi, since I just wanted to mention one because we're talking about Gandhi today. And this is more in the political realm, whereas Bamba was not in the political realm. But Abdul Ghaffar Khan, was an Afghan devout Muslim, and he was a close friend of Mahatma Gandhi. He found, in fact, Gandhi was his teacher, and he founded the nonviolent army called Servants of God, the Khudai Khidmat Gar, during the 1920s. And he served in Afghanistan and Pakistan and for Gandhi's cause in India. The Khudai Khidmat Gar was founded on a belief in the power of Gandhi's notion of satyagraha, a form of active nonviolence as captured in an oath that they took. And but Abdul Ghaffar Khan was political, working towards independence of India. And this is what he told his members, which, by the way, his organization recruited over 100,000 members, totally nonviolent. They had no weapons. And they're actually the ones in the movie on Gandhi, if you watch it, that they were so willing to risk their lives because they had been actually very violent in their previous lives on the border of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. But they gave that up because they were so inspired by Gandhi's teachings. And anyway, so Abdul Ghaffar Khan said to his members, "I am going to give you such a weapon that the police and the army will not be able to stand against it. It's the weapon of the Prophet, peace be upon him, but you are not aware of it. That weapon is patience and righteousness. No power on earth can stand against it." Skipping a little bit to closer to the present time, I just wanted to mention this because we're in Malaysia. And I came to Malaysia 10 years ago, and I learned about, and I don't know if any of you remember this or if you knew about it, but I came to learn of the Kuala Lumpur Foundation to Criminalize War, attesting that war is a crime. And I attended the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, which Prime Minister at that time, Mahathir Mohamad, had initiated this, to investigate war crimes. And its verdicts were symbolic. It was not authorized by the United Nations. But since these war criminals of that time were not being brought to account anywhere else, he did this here. So I thought this was very interesting. And this, he established this in 2007. So in 2011, the tribunal here in Malaysia tried former US President George Bush and former Prime Minister Tony Blair and found them guilty of crimes against peace, that the two had planned, prepared, and invaded the state of Iraq in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. And very interestingly, because this is so important, we're here today, and that Professor Osman Bakr has brought this subject up now, is that in November 2013, that's 11 years ago, this tribunal here in KL found Israel guilty of genocide of the Palestinian people. And that was 11 years ago. So this has been going on way even before that. But they had this tribunal here. And how much publicity it got around the world, well, you know, it did get some. But as I said, it was more symbolic. So one of the reasons I'm mentioning this is that, you know, the possibilities of peace and nonviolence and the future of it, because this is a topic we have here, it's definitely possible. And you know, this tribunal that was started in 2007, I think it kind of petered out. Maybe, you know, it didn't have enough mobilization to really take off. And I'm sure there's other efforts around the world. But the possibility is there. And I know everybody has a hope for peace and nonviolence to reign in the future. But whether the mobilization will happen for all of this? That's another question. And also, you know, we are at risk of nuclear war in 2 areas of the world right now, Israel and Lebanon, and Ukraine and Russia. So, talking about the future, well, we'll see what the future, what lies in the future. But to mention, mentioned nonviolence, and then the right to violence or to fight back. And again, I don't believe it's a matter so much of whether it's either violence or nonviolence, as much as standing up for the truth as a main element in achieving peace and nonviolence. And the importance of protecting people who are being harmed. I'm going to skip over this because I don't have enough time for all of this. But recently, the United Nations, this is like only a few months ago, International Court of Justice said that they declared that, for example, Palestinians have a right to be protected from acts of genocide. And in fact, not only they have a right, but it's the other states' duty. They have a moral and legal obligation to urgently take military action, that's physical force, this is not nonviolence, physical force, against Israel to protect civilians and prevent genocide. There's a responsibility to protect principle, this is all in the United Nations, which requires states to take collective action in a timely and decisive action to prevent genocide. So, in fact, they even said that Hezbollah has a legal right to target the IDF because Israel has conducted over 4,000 attacks into Lebanon. So, nonviolent aspects and physical warfare, the overriding truth is to know which direction needs to be taken. And again, I keep repeating this, the truth being the essence of all of this. So it's not uncommon that people have said that wars are the result of lies. And again, I'm talking about the truth, how important the truth is. And if wars can be started by lies, then peace can be started by the truth. People are imprisoned for telling the truth. And there's a political analyst, Sarah Al-Yafi, said that in contemporary history, the origins and escalation of nearly every war can be traced back to lies, to media lies, fraudulent journalism, and really journalistic malpractice. So some people say, well, they're as guilty as the other war criminals. Truth, as I mentioned before, is a major element in the Quran. And the Al-Azhab, verse 24, that Allah may reward the truthful for their truth and punish the hypocrites if he wills or accept their repentance. Chapter 17:81, and declare the truth has come and falsehood has vanished. Indeed, falsehood is bound to vanish. So, on our topic of the future of peace and nonviolence, according to the Islamic tradition, surrender to the truth, to the will of the Creator, and according to many other religions, and Hinduism, Buddhism, and Ahimsa as a gospel of peace and nonviolence, this is meant to bring peace. When we understand the principles of the message that has been revealed in the different religious traditions. And Gandhi called Satyagraha a truth force. So his goal was to revive society by the truth from within. So I think Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba teaches that transformation outwardly in society has to come from a transformation inwardly. So that's what he was trying to teach. He taught Islamic law, and he also said that people must be willing to transform themselves inwardly. In fact, he told students that if they were not willing to transform themselves inwardly, and they just wanted to learn from books, that they should go elsewhere. So when the person who introduced me to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was Sheikh Abdullahi J, and at the time that I met him, over 20 years ago, he was a member of parliament in Senegal, and he was running for president. And he had an interesting political slogan, God is one. And whereas he would mention that whereas politicians speak of developing a country, and he was, of course, very interested in this because Senegal is a very poor country, but he also spoke of the priority of developing people to develop the country, rather than just developing the country's resources. So for peace to reign within, for peace to reign on the outside, then there has to be change within. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba dedicated his whole life to help people develop through religious teachings in his religious schools, agricultural endeavors, and creating mosques. And even the Quran states that God will not bring about outward change without change within of people. And the verse in the Quran is, Lo, Allah changeth not the condition of a folk until they first change that which is in their hearts. This was the goal of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, that through finding means and ways to versify these great texts and to help people to remember through beautiful singing and chanting of these teachings, that would help to transform their hearts. So Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, along with other religious leaders in Senegal, the Tijani, the Qadiriya, inspired people to transform society by transforming themselves and their teachings. So this is what makes, I think, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba relevant now with the teaching that he has left. So one can continue the process of inner and outer transformation towards peace through the legacy that he left. So I'm gonna stop now because I could go on for a lot longer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, our last speaker for this morning is Dr. Sundar Viswalingam. Dr. Sundar is an independent researcher on comparative culture and interreligious dialogue based in Chicago. He's been there since 2001. His range of research and publications include comparative study of aesthetics, religion, philosophy, and mythology, largely extrapolating from South Asian cultural history. A central concern is the etiology of human violence, whether manifested as recurring religious conflict or managed through competitive yet peaceful acculturation. He has collaborated throughout his anthropologist with his wife, Dr. Elizabeth Chevalier Viswalingam's fieldwork on the popular worship of Bhairava, the Hindu god of transgression in South and Southeast Asia. In 1993, Sundar quit academia to switch to computer publishing, where he eventually became director of research in Indianapolis for the Pearson Technology Group. While working as an independent consultant publishing technology in Chicago since 2001, he returned to his original passion for research in the humanities from a wider perspective and scope than before. Dr. Viswalingam.
This one. Okay, good. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our esteemed hosts and guests, distinguished hosts and guests. Then I would like to thank Prabhakaran for inviting my participation, despite my not being a specialist of Gandhi, of his writings and itinerary. Actually, it would be pretentious and even silly of me, after so many books and work has been done, to offer to add anything on this directly. So what I told Prabha was that what I could do is, because my wife and I specialize on violence from multiple perspectives, I could rather address this topic of violence and non-violence in a broader sense, and then place Gandhi in that context. I'm also delighted to participate now, because Prabha had actually invited me to participate in last year's conference at the ICC, but unfortunately our tickets were already booked to go back to Chicago, so I am able to honor his invitation now. And furthermore, this is a kind of an auspicious occasion for me. I know that this conference, this panel was largely inspired by Professor Dato Kothman Baka, and I'm meeting him now again after more than 40 years. On a visit from India to KL, we met and discussed perennial philosophy, and actually I took him to meet Ananda Kumaraswamy, his biographer, of whom, both of us are admirers. So that's by way of acknowledgements. And many of the points I'm about to present now have already stimulated discussion in Prabha's Malaysian Indian Heritage Society. We've been already debating many of these points. So a couple of questions though, a couple of points before I even begin. The High Commissioner pointed out that, to get the 2nd of October recognized as the International Day of Violence, where originally there was some hesitation. Finally, a large number of countries signed up. And so, it shows that there is this intense desire worldwide to solve conflicts. Conflicts cannot be avoided through non-violent means. But yet I wonder how many of those countries which signed up are actually not just actually perpetrating violence, if not physical violence, then other kinds of structural violence, etc. And if I go a bit further, Professor Bakar, in fact, mentioned in passing that even the Nobel Prize has become a joke. And I immediately thought of none other than President Barack Obama. You see, Ahmadou Bamba, we're only discovering him now, and we are discovering him through the works, his actual works, his life. Similarly with Gandhi, we are celebrating him because of what he did up, even posthumously. But what was very interesting about Barack Obama was that, even before he became president, there was a great expectancy all over the world that he would be a kind of a messiah of peace. So much so that the Nobel Prize was awarded to him at the very beginning of his presidency, before he had even accomplished a single thing. And towards the end of his presidency, there was a big ruckus in the U.S. about unconstitutional killings, weekly killings of Muslims, including American Muslims, around the world through drones and other means. So these were weekly meetings when he would be presented a list of people, and then he would just tick out those who could be killed that particular week. And later on, when asked about it, he joked and said to his aides, and this is on record, "Oh, I'm very good at killing people." So when Professor Ahmadou Bamba talked about the Nobel Prize being a joke, so all of us want non-violence, but it is not so. Want to achieve peace through non-violence, but it shows how formidable the task is, where the very people who preach this are very often doing the opposite things. So the title of my talk is Non-Violence Before and After Gandhi. So what I would like to actually demonstrate is there was a very strong tradition of non-violence even before Gandhi. So it didn't appear out of thin air and work his magic from his single person. There was already a fertile ground for him. And so there was Gandhism in a sense before Gandhi, but now we are more concerned, more interested in the future of nonviolence, in the future of Gandhi's ideas. So when I speak of nonviolence before and after Gandhi, seeing all the challenges there are to implementing nonviolence, I think it would be useful and even fruitful to go before Gandhi to see how we can reinterpret, adapt after Gandhi. So that's the significance of my title. Okay. So as I said, my wife and I specialize in violence, and we've written a long paper, Violence and the Other in Hinduism and Islam, which actually discusses violence in a much broader level, but draws its example from this, Hinduist Muslim violence in India. So, and the whole idea is how was violence contained in different traditions. In the Islamic tradition, because I think that every tradition has had to try and contain violence and has struggled with it using many different strategies. So we have this very interesting idea of the lesser jihad and the greater jihad, Jihad al-Akbar, in the Islamic tradition. So we actually start in a sense with just war, and then we try to transcend it by transporting it into the inner level of the soul. And in the Indian context, it's the opposite. There is the notion of non-violence from the beginning, and yet there is violence in India. For example, in Sri Lanka there is violence, despite it being a Buddhist country, with the emphasis on violence. So there's a problem of violence. And Professor Bakar asked, is man by his very nature violent? And then he suggested that maybe if you look at Ahmadou Bamba, we would say that no, there is some aspect of man which is, which transcends violence. So our thesis, for example, in this paper, is that in fact, man is intrinsically violent. There is an animal nature in man, which is violent, which is our inheritance. This is what forms the soul, the nafs. So when Professor Bakar spent a lot of time on the etymology of Mahatma, the great soul, Mahatma. So there actually, in a sense, we could see Gandhi and Mahatma as being opposed. The Mahatma became the Mahatma because he fought against Gandhi, the man, in himself. So one could look at it in that way. Similarly, Ahmadou Bamba, because he had surrendered to Allah, So as human beings, as nafs, and I think so many Islamic scholars have written about this, we have to struggle against ourselves, the nafs. So this is why containing violence in the Indic traditions. So my presentation is in 4 parts. The first is Gandhi in his Indian socio-religious context. Questions. So I'm going to have 2 slides of questions. So I feel that very important, in facing these challenges, the difficulties of applying nonviolence, it's very important to ask the right questions. If you don't ask the right questions, we don't get the right answers or something approximating the right answers. And then I am just going to present a case study from a kind of a satyagraha, we can call it that, in Benares. Benares is like this, the Mecca for the Hindus. So there was a big non-violent resistance by the whole of Benares, including Hindus, Muslims, Brahmins, the lowest caste, everybody against the British in 1811. So I'm going to use this as a case study. And what is very important about this series of events, which have been much studied, is that there was no single charismatic figure like Gandhi. So the whole population somehow, despite it being so diverse, managed to organize itself against the British in a completely non-violent way. Even the British were very impressed. So, at the same time, I do not want to minimize the uniqueness of Gandhi. So, I would like in the third section to touch on what Gandhi has done with his inherited tradition, his uniqueness, and how he transformed this ethos, pre-existing ethos, towards the aim of political independence, and how spiritual energies were directed towards a political goal. Finally, and I will again raise questions, can nonviolence be generalized into a universal panacea? So Michel brought up several times genocide and Hezbollah and all. So this is a good question to ask. In the case, in India it worked. And I like to say, because India was special, the British were also not like the Dutch or the Nazis. But what about in Gaza? Will nonviolence work? So there is a well-known scholar in the US called Norman Finkelstein. He's Jewish. He's a survivor of Holocaust. Both his parents were Holocaust survivors. And he is a very strong champion of the Palestinian cause, and he has suffered greatly because of it. And discovering Gandhi was a huge thing for him, and he wrote an entire book on Gandhi, how to understand Gandhi, and with the whole purpose of trying to see, can we apply Gandhian methods to Israel? So, fundamental questions to ask the Mahatma today. So I'm going to pose the questions because I think we need to think about these issues because it's much more complicated than we think to pursue a non-violent solution to the challenges in our world. And I'll just make 1 or 2 comments without actually providing answers. So the first one I already mentioned, did the father of the nation invent Satyagraha? Or is it an ancient tradition that he rediscovered for himself? Was non-violence primarily a political tactics or a way of being inherited from Jain, Hindu, Sufi, etc. renouncers? So here is a man who has renounced the world, but unlike other renouncers, like there were a lot of Sufi holy men who advised the Muslim rulers, but they were reclusive people, and the rulers would go to them and seek advice. So in the case of Gandhi, it's as if he has brought this whole tradition of renunciation into active engagement with the world. So Prabhakaran emphasized right from the beginning that these are actually 2 spiritual traditions. Ahmadou Bamba, Gandhi were actually 2 spiritual traditions. He didn't say they were political traditions. So they were actually spiritual traditions, the force of the self, inner self, being applied to the challenges of the world. So would the Indian masses, regardless of caste and creed, been so receptive to Gandhi if not for this inherited spiritual stereotype? That is to say, the image of Gandhi was already a very ancient image. There is the kind of the renouncer, Buddhist renouncers, Sufi renouncers, and across the spectrum, whether they were Hindus, Muslims, or whatever, the masses respected these figures for their spirituality. They trusted them for their impartiality and their selflessness. So had not there been this fertile climate, would Gandhi have succeeded in India? Would he have succeeded in Nazi Germany or even in the Dutch East Indies? I'm not so sure. So I ask, would a similar movement have been as successful in Nazi Germany, Dutch Indonesia, or even today's USA? Gandhi's biographer, for example, when speaking about the genocide of the Jews in Nazi Germany, he records Gandhi as having said that, maybe if the Jews were to sacrifice themselves, the whole world would, firstly he said it's a great crime. And then he said if the Jews were to sacrifice themselves, the whole world would be shocked, and that may move the world, etc. And actually this was tried. When the Dutch invaded Bali, the whole court, all the women, children from the Balinese court came out. Completely, they didn't fight, they were not aggressive, and they were just mowed down by the Dutch. It's a tradition called Puputan. So more questions for the Mahatma today. So how to understand, for example, in today's climate, Hindutva climate, the simultaneous contradictory allegiance now to both Gandhi and Savarkar, for example. In the Indian Parliament, you have portraits of both of them facing each other. So there is a belief that both of them have contributed something important to the nation, and we cannot actually, but reconciling that is a bit of a problem. Recently, Professor Sugata Bose visited from Harvard, and he was actually, all his books try to make a case for Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, advocacy of armed resistance against the British. He actually raised the Indian National Army in Singapore and here. And the discussion came up as to how to reconcile armed resistance of Netaji with Gandhi's non-violent, advocacy of non-violence at all costs. And these two figures in many ways admired and respected each other, but still there is this contradiction. So what is the place of violence in Hindu tradition? You could ask the same question about Islam or Buddhism. Can we bracket aside the sacrificial notations of his assassination? See, there's something ironic in the way Gandhi died, in the way he was assassinated. His assassin, first of all, prostrated before Gandhi, before shooting him in front. It was not like some sniper shooting him in his chest. So there is a statement like, ideologically, there was a repudiation of Gandhi, but at the same time, there was a great respect for him at the same time. So it was more or less like there's a kind of a sacrificial connotation to it. So how do we understand this? My wife and I have worked a great deal on sacrificial violence in the various traditions. So we have sacrifice during the pilgrimage to Mecca. So similarly, sacrifice is a very ancient, their animals are sacrificed. And ultimately, sacrifice of animals, like Jesus, animals sacrificed ultimately already in the Old Testament, whether it's Isaac or Ishmael. Animal sacrifice is a substitute for human sacrifice. In the case of the Christian image, Christ, there is no sacrifice. In Christianity, there is no sacrifice, but you have the image of Christ on the cross. So why this centrality? And it's relevant for Gandhi, when we ask about what happened to him. So is the Islamic advocacy of righteous jihad a mistaken enterprise, or can it be reconciled with non-violent satyagraha? It's very important that the greater jihad is not a contradiction of jihad, because it's called the lesser jihad. It's not non-jihad, it's a lesser jihad. And I think non-Muslims, especially to appreciate this, would have to go back to the very origins of Islam, because when the Muslims were a minority, they were already under threat of attack in Mecca. They had to flee to Medina. So this question of violence and self-protection through armed is already rare right at the beginning of Islam. If I want to give you a parallel, the US is probably the only country where the Constitution, basically everybody has the right to bear arms in the US. It's constitutionally, it's embedded in the Constitution, and there's a good reason for it. Because, of course, we think, oh, US is a violent country, everybody carries arms. But the reason for it is that when they got their independence from the British, when we got the independence from the British, it is only because all the citizens were armed. So I'm not trying to say non-violence is bad or the violence, the armed resistance is good. I'm trying to say that there's a complex relationship that we need to understand and try to work out in our own minds. Could similar contextual questions be raised with regard to Bamba and the Sufi traditions in Africa? So, because even within Sufism, there are actually Sufis who are very pious. I mean, on one side, there are people who completely renounce violence, like Ahmadou Bamba, but there are also Sufis, like in India, there is a scholar called Richard Eaton who has studied the Sufi movement, the Sufis, warrior Sufis in the Deccan. How at the very beginning, they were very often right in the forefront. So later on, after these regions were Islamized, they became very beneficent and, to all communities, etc. So again, it's very complex. Whichever tradition you take, the question is complex. And we should not brush these complexities under the rug. Otherwise, we won't really get anywhere with just pious wishes. That's the point. Okay, now I want to come to this case study, the All Benares 1811 Satyagraha against the British. So in 1811 in Benares, which as I said is like Mecca for the Hindus, there was, the British tried to impose a house tax on the whole city. And what happened is the whole city, without any single leader, following any single leader like Gandhi, coordinated and resisted the British in a completely peaceful way, fasting, lamenting, etc. in public. And they were successful. They were successful because the British were obliged to repeal the house tax. So, and this is interesting. So, as you know, unlike the Islamic model where everybody is equal, in principle everybody is equal. Even the way you pray, it's equal. You don't have an intermediary, a priest between you and God, the way you pray in a mosque. India, we still have the problem of caste. And at that time in Benares, it was basically a caste-based society. So, this whole peaceful, non-violent resistance was organized on a caste basis. So the castes collaborated and they were all seated according to their caste. There are also Muslim castes, it's very important to remember, Brahmins, etc., etc. So it's already sociologically very interesting how this came about. And as I said, it included Hindus and Muslims, Brahmins and Dalits, all classes. So the British themselves was very impressed by this, because they had not seen anything like this. It defied their stereotypes about the country. The second thing, another thing is this, in the caste hierarchy, the Brahmins are at the top, and we had before, untouchability. So people go to Benares for their bodies to be burnt there, the ashes to be dipped in the Ganga, because that's for them salvation. And the people who actually perform these cremations are the lowest caste, you see. So what happened during this, in order to prevent defection by any of the upper castes, the domes, who are the funerary specialists, threatened to refuse to burn the bodies, which means you don't get salvation. So this is, of course, very different from what we see later with Gandhi, but there are continuities. This is what I want to say. So the colonial administration was obliged to suspend the tax bill. And what was this revolt about? Of course, there was an economic aspect to this, the financial burden of paying this tax, which everybody was against. But there was more to it. Because, for example, in Benares at that time, 25%, a quarter of the population were actually scholars, Brahmin scholars, who were studying various aspects of Indian tradition, something like Nalanda for the Buddhism. Benares itself was like that. And they lived on charity. Similarly, there was a large number of fakirs, Muslim ascetics, who were supported by the Muslim community. So a lot of people in Benares lived on charity. That was a kind of a principle, the giving of alms in both traditions. And so it was actually a revolt for the preservation of a certain kind of moral order. And one could argue that Gandhi also was actually fighting not just to politically defeat the British, to get them out of India, but to fight to maintain a certain moral order. He was also a great reformist, trying to reform the traditions he received, but at the same time he was trying to preserve something, and this is very clear in his attitude to caste. Okay? And another important thing is this was a model for similar mass demonstrations in many other cities in North India, which were not as successful, but nevertheless, this form of satyagraha took place there. So, am I not perhaps exaggerating the pertinence of this single episode in one city? And I am not, because there are entire books, especially two very important seminal books, devoted just to this, to study the beginnings of communalism in India. These studies go back to this particular series of events, because what happened was, in 1809, there was a very serious, unprecedented Hindu-Muslim riots in Benares. It was unprecedented because the previous 100 years, this didn't happen. And so people were trying to understand why this happened. Was it because of the British, etc.? And in 1810, there was actually fighting between you're talking about violence and non-violence, there was fighting between the military and the police. I can't go into the details. And on either side, there were Muslims and Hindus. See, there was some kind of political, civil violence, but the religious barrier was gone. And then in 1811, we had this peaceful, non-violent. So it's mind-boggling to understand this continuum. There was no break between these three phases. So yes, and what I want to really emphasize is that there was not a single charismatic leader then. So now, what was actually unique about Gandhi at the dawn of independence? So first, the point I would like to make is, if Gandhi was so successful, he was able to harness this Indian ethos, which was there. It was not, which was shared by all the religious groups in India, and as exemplified by the 1811 protests. So, what was unique about Gandhi? He was a self-sacrificing renouncer, and thereby earns universal trust and allegiance. So he actually didn't have hatred towards the British, like Ahmadou Bamba with the French. So people could see, that this is a different kind of a person, somebody we could all rally against because he won't betray us. See? Like one other figure I just spoke about this in the beginning. So, okay, very quickly. So he galvanized the masses towards socio-cultural and spiritual Swarajya. So the kind of independence that Gandhi was fighting for was not just political but spiritual. Prabhakaran emphasized at the beginning. And he was a unifying big figure. You see, there's one strange thing, that whenever there were disagreements within the Congress party, Gandhi would go on fast. So even the people who disagreed with him would submit, concede. Why? Because they realized that without him, all these divergent tendencies would, you know, it would break apart. See, so he's a unifying figure. Another thing, he was familiar enough with the West to beat the British at their own game, because he stayed in the UK, he studied in the UK, he had already done trial runs in South Africa, etc. And then I think this is also very important. People say, oh, Gandhi failed, you know, the partition, etc. One could say rather that he laid the moral foundation for Hindu-Muslim reconciliation, and it is for South Asians to build on that legacy. So no mere political tactic, Gandhigiri exemplified a way of life. So now I'm going to very quickly, just give me another 5 minutes, I'm just going to rush through this whole question, whether non-violence is a universal panacea or is it something workable. So there was a lot of talk about ISIS and ISIL and all. So I think there's something even more serious involved. See, if at least these people were actually fighting for Islam, if really they were fighting for, you know, for the good of Islam, at least one could say, okay, good. But what has happened is these movements have been hijacked by other powers. For example, the Islamic Jihad, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. It was used by the Americans, you know, Brzezinski and others. So it's actually used to bring down secular governments in Syria or in other places. So there's a kind of a hijacking by people who actually share no sympathies with Islam. So this is a big risk. And then non-violence in service of often bloody color revolution. So there's an Albert Einstein Institute in the US which promotes non-violence. And the way this happens, like it happened in Yugoslavia, Serbia, even in Ukraine, and etc., or in Syria, you have non-violent protests, and then somebody mysteriously starts shooting at the protesters and at the police, etc., and then there is violence. And the way the whole world sees it is there is an suppression of a non-violent movement. So things get really very complicated and devious. So would it be a viable, I already asked this, political strategy for restoring Palestinian rights? For example, the caste system itself, which I touched upon just now, which Gandhi also to a certain extent espoused. Can we say it is a form of structural violence? Will a classless society, which everybody is fighting for, egalitarian, necessarily be immune to strife? Is there any society not founded ultimately on force? And then, of course, the same question, why is sacrificial violence so central to religious traditions? Thank you. I'm sorry I took so much time.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to everyone present here today. Thank you very much for a compelling discussion on non-violence. My question, I actually have a point to make and also a question with the last presentation especially. When we talk about ahimsa or non-violence, there's this idea that it is from the Vedic tradition as well. We look at the Jain perspective and we look about salikana, for example, fasting unto death. So it's a very good, very interesting tradition. But at the same time, how do we quell those concerns about a violence not abated? If you look at the text from René Girard, for example, in his text Violence and the Sacred, there's the example of Abel and Cain, where one brother kills the other when there's no outlet for violence. So how do we reconcile the fact, like for example, the Malays, we had the kris at one time, and the Punjabis had the kirpan. So people had these weapons to defend themselves. So violence in itself is not a problem, but how it's perpetuated becomes problematic. So how do we reconcile the fact that, you know, violence or non-violence can actually be weaponized by those who are, you know, unscrupulous? Because also we look at the example of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Mahatma Gandhi. both in the global south, right? So how do we reconcile the fact that non-violence is sometimes weaponized by those of the Western powers? Thank you.
Thank you for this really very good question. I actually corresponded with René Girard while I was still in Benares before I even went to the West. And we were even discussing organizing a conference. You see, and this is, and your mention of Girard is very important. I've read all his books. And Girard actually took his ideas, basic ideas about sacrificial violence from India. If you take one of his books, it's all over on the cover that he got this from studying the Vedic texts and all of that, this notion of sacrificial violence. So you are right. In fact, a central notion in Girard is the notion of the scapegoat. Scapegoat, right? So society needs, because humans are actually inherently violent, and very often they establish unity by directing the violence at a scapegoat. And in a sense, the victim in the sacrifice is a kind of scapegoat. In fact, the word scapegoat comes from the role of the goat. See? So for example, in the pilgrimage to Mecca, you have a scene where you stone the devil, right? You throw pebbles at the devil, etc. And why do you throw pebbles? Because Shaitan tried to persuade Ishmael from not being sacrificed, not to sacrifice Ishmael, right? So all traditions, not just the Indian, even the Greek tradition, all of them have this, the Jewish tradition, on Yom Kippur, you have this scapegoat. So these practices imply that human beings are basically violent. And unless they have the outlet for violence, the society will destroy itself. This is Girard's thesis, and I agree with him. Till now, we have not succeeded in. So I think that in the case of, in the Hindu tradition, it has been dealt with in a very different way. In the case of Islam, I think this is where the notion of jihad comes in. You know, I think it's tied up with sacrificial violence and also with ultimately suppressing this violence, you know, like Ahmadou Bamba and others have done. So different traditions have had, at their historical origins, have had to face very different circumstances. And so this challenge of violence, they try to resolve it in their own manner. And none of the traditions have really succeeded because human beings are what they are human beings. Thank you.
Thank you. So that
I think what we need to be clear about is what is violence, the definition of violence. Violence needs to be differentiated, distinguished from the use of force. They are not identical. So in the Islamic perspective, that's why the issue of violence was discussed very, very in detail by the jurists, by the fuqaha, in order how to distinguish between basically force that is permissible and force that is not permissible. The one that is not permissible according to the divine law, that is violence. That is violence. Now, there's another level of response, which is the inner, from the inner dimension, which is concern of tasawwuf, concern of Sufism. That divides into parts, two parts. That's why there's when we, for example, evaluate Ahmadou Bamba, you know, he was a Sufi. So he judges things from the inner dimension of the inner part, the spiritual part. But then he should be distinguished. I refer, for example, the permissibility of the jihad, the smaller jihad, because the Prophet allowed that in self-defense. But in the case of Bamba, he didn't want to entertain even that level, which is permissible. In other words, the jihad that's permissible, you go to the battlefield. No, in the case, he put another level. This is the saintly level. The saintly level, the kind of, the attitude of Jesus is somebody, your right cheek, you turn it to the other one. That is the saintly response, which is not the response that only of a few people. So Bamba, although he knew that it is possible to fight against the French, but he did not. He did not fight the French at the level of the use of force. Even that force is not violence, it's force, permissible force. I think that basically 3 levels how to deal with violence. So it is possible, and Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, the Algerian Sufi, fought against the French differently from Bamba. He fought against the French using sword, but he was also Sufi. I think that's very important to distinguish between the 3 responses within Islam.
Okay, that brings us to a close of the session. Thank you very much. Lovely session. Any announcement? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Philip Matthews, and our distinguished panelists, Prof. Emeritus Dato' Dr. Osman Bakar, Mr. Prabhakar Nair, Ms. Michelle Kimball, and Ms. Suntar for the insightful discussion. I kindly request the moderator and all the panelists to stay on the stage for the souvenir session. Honorable panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, we now invite Prof. Dato' Dr. Abdul Aziz Bagud to be on stage for the presentation of souvenir session. Please welcome. Sorry. We now call upon Professor Emeritus Dato' Dr. Osman Bakar to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia India Heritage Society. Thank you, Prof. Osman. We now call upon Mr. Prabhakar Nair to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia India Heritage Society. Thank you, Mr. Prabhakaran. We now, We now call upon Mr. Suntar to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia India Heritage Society. Now, we will call upon Mr. Philip Matthew to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia India Heritage Society. Now, upon further request, I would like to call all the... Yes? I'm so sorry. We now call upon Ms. Michelle Kimball to receive a token of appreciation from ISTAC IIUM and Malaysia-India Heritage Society. Everyone, please stay on the stage. Now, upon further request, I would call all the members from Malaysia-India Heritage Society to come front for the photography session.